Okay, hi guys. I'm reporting to you live, not live at all actually. This is last night for you guys. But I am reporting to you from my house where I'm still a bit sick. So I want us to move forward with the next skill that we'll be focusing on. So I'm going back to Edpuzzle, which I used a lot during Zoom World, and apologies if you did, and this is giving you dark flashbacks. But this is a good way to still have that kind of giving information, you practicing it, and then, checking in sort of thing. I also want to apologize if it feels jerky at points, like weird, like start and stop, because when I have to cough, I'm pausing the recording. And if there's anything else that comes up, you might see a little note pop up explaining it, because I have a dog that will probably bark at an inopportune moment. All right. So if you read the sub note, which I'm assuming you did because you've gotten here, you should have spent the first 10 or so minutes of class doing independent reading or studying vocabulary. And the real meat of today is getting to know the components of the rhetorical situation, which is something that we will work with a ton, kind of starting now and moving forward. I know some of you are very familiar with this. Some of you are kind of familiar and you remember it from English 2 honors. Other people haven't heard of this at all. So wherever you are, you're going to be fine. But we'll do a little kind of lecture practice thing through Edpuzzle, and then I'll release you from the Edpuzzle to do a group practice. Mariana's partner, where you're identifying the rhetorical situation in Blackfish. So you'll need your Blackfish notes that you took a while back now in order to do this. Homework tonight is an independent practice with identifying rhetorical situation, and you are either choosing. Sorry, one second. You are either choosing In the Name of Love or Why Don't We Complain to do this practice with. So that homework assignment, sorry if this is disjointed, I just had to pause for a bit. That homework assignment will be in Google Classroom, and you're doing it independently, practicing the skills that you're introduced to today through our notes, and then that you're practicing again today with your group. Homework is to do it by yourself, either with In the Name of Love or Why Don't We Complain, and it's your choice. Either one will work equally well for this. So looking at this is our little skill map for Unit 1. Yesterday, I asked you to do this as a practice, describing a writer's line of reasoning and then evaluating it. We've been working on this a bit. We will eventually have an assessment on this, but I want to show you some examples of work that has full proficiency with this skill and mastery even before we do that assessment, just so you know. Today we're working on these two things, 1C and 1F, which we haven't really directly talked about yet, but you'll see that it is something that's kind of built into what you already do when you write, and also just when you are interacting with other people, especially this one. But it has to do with this thing called a rhetorical situation. To introduce that, this was something that was going to be really interactive in person. We're going to have a little index card and do something on both sides, but we can't do that right now. So what I would like you to do is just find a little scrap of paper, like something that you're going to throw away or eat or whatever afterwards. But you're not turning it in. You're not sharing it unless you want to with your friend. It's just something for the purpose of our exercise. So your job, and remember you can pause an Edpuzzle, just like I am on my side. I'm pausing it every so often. But you can pause an Edpuzzle if you need to do something or get something out. But what I'd like you to do is, on that slip of paper, write about a time that you did something really embarrassing and you learned something from it. So use whatever language you want to as you're talking about this horrifying, embarrassing thing that happened to you. You're not going to share it, you're not going to turn it into me, you're going to recycle it or get rid of it after. But pause the Edpuzzle and take like 2 minutes, real quick. Just write about the time that embarrassing thing happened and what you learned from it. Okay, this time I'm going to ask you to again think about a time that you learned from an embarrassing situation, but pretend now that you're in a job interview and it's a job that you really want, and the interviewer is telling you, all right, tell me about a time that you learned from an embarrassing situation. And then this time there's going to be a little pop-up in Edpuzzle for you to write your answer that you would say to that job interviewer. Okay, write it. Okay, and my question now, think about what you wrote on the little scrap of paper when you had no one that was going to see it, or just your friend next to you in class or whatever. What changed when you were writing to that situation and that prompt versus when you wrote for the job interview? And here, I'm gonna in a moment have that little pop up again and ask you to identify some features of your writing that changed. You don't need to get specific. It could be something like, for example, I bet a lot of people are gonna say word choice, right, or vocabulary. Like maybe you use certain words that you would like when you're writing just for yourself that you wouldn't use in a job interview. That makes sense. What are other things that you did differently with what you wrote? Okay, so this is where the notes part would start. So if you are someone that does not magically remember things, you probably want to record this. This is us talking about the rhetorical situation for the first time. And again, this will be a major part of our class moving forward. So the goal here is that you're able to identify the rhetorical situation, which, as you'll hear in a moment, composes of the speaker, occasion, audience, and purpose of a really wide variety of texts. So the thing that you did with the embarrassing moment, the reason that the things like that features of your writing changed were because you had a different rhetorical situation. This one you weren't writing for anyone in particular, or it was just for you, I guess. Your purpose was because your teacher told you to, so probably you had a variety of purposes to entertain yourself or to just check the box. You did the thing to maybe entertain the person next to you if you were like, I'm going to show this to whatever, whoever it is afterwards, whatever. You had different purposes. This one, you obviously had the purpose of getting a job that you really want. Your audience was this interviewer. It's a whole different situation. So the rhetorical situation, all it means is that it's a situation, well, I should avoid that word in the definition. It's the circumstances within which a text is created. So that means that it's everything surrounding the composition of a text, whether that text is an essay or a documentary or a billboard or something else entirely, this still applies. So the success of a piece of writing or a text of any type is dependent on the author being aware of their rhetorical situation and adapting everything about their work in order to fit into it. Right? So this would apply to the style that they write in. This would apply to the format that they write in. This would apply to like pretty much everything about composing the piece. There's an acronym that we will use. That acronym is SOAP, and it points us towards the four main components of the rhetorical situation. The first of which is speaker. So this would be the voice of the text. So what kind of person or organization are they portraying themselves as? An ad or organization. Because if it's something like a billboard or an advertisement, it's more of like an organization or a product. What do they seem to value? What do they dislike? What do they care about? What do they not care about? Who are they? Pretty much the people that are the person or people that are presenting this text. So really helpful clues for this would be things like the tone, choice of details, jokes are a big way of revealing the speaker, but anything that indicates a way that the voice of the text is trying to characterize itself. As an example for each of these, we're going to use what I racked my brains, and I think this is the most recognizable text of 2023. Like I couldn't think of one that was more likely that you'd know than I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King Jr. It also is a good one for the month of February and all months, but you know. All right, so here is a still from it with our speaker in I Have a Dream. There's things like, all right, he's obviously, we know he's the leader of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. We know he's a religious man. He's a Baptist Christian. He's a minister. He's portraying himself as highly educated. If you look at the vocabulary in this speech, it's really elevated. He's patriotic. He's dedicated to the cause. He's dedicated to the country, right? He's angry, but he's hopeful. He's not giving up. So these are all things that if you read through I Have a Dream, this is revealed, right? There's tons more that you can say about the speaker in this speech. The O in SOAP, is occasion. This word exigence, you will pretty much only ever see in your life on the AP Lang test, which, you know, it's not the best reason to learn a word, but I do want you to know it if you see it. So exigence is pretty much exactly a synonym for occasion. and it refers to the context. And that would be both general context and really specific context in which a text was composed. So you'd want to consider things like personal context. If you're writing a breakup letter, there's a lot of personal context. You'd want to think of like the immediate context. If you're in a job interview and you're giving an answer, that's pretty immediate context. You want to consider the larger things too, like any social or historical or political things that are going on. And it all comes back to like what events may have prompted the author to write, what sorts of things are they responding to, what sorts of things are affecting them in the audience, and yeah, it's what's going on around the text. And big things for this would be, all right, like the date published, cultural references. If it's a speech or something that's like being delivered, then obviously there's the physical surroundings. So with the Martin Luther King Jr. speech, he talks about it being an urgent moment in the civil rights movement, right? He repeats that word urgent quite a bit throughout the speech. He is physically on the Lincoln Memorial steps in DC, which is significant because it's the 100-year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And that's in a country that was still and is whatever still suffers from the effects of the slavery that the Emancipation Proclamation had allegedly ended, right? So this is all important context. It's not the only important context, there's a lot more, but just to give you a sense for what we're looking for here. Audience is huge. So audience would be not just literally who hears or reads it, but who is it designed for? So who's the intended audience? Who's supposed to be finding it persuasive? Who has it been engineered for? And you want to identify like what assumptions can you make about that audience? What do they care about? What do they find funny? What do they find meaningful or poignant? Like what matters? So things that would help reveal this would be cultural references, tone, the type of evidence used, the complexity of both their argument and their vocabulary, anything like that. Because not all, texts aren't, like an essay is not written for everyone. There's an intended audience that it's trying to be successful with. For the audience in MLK's speech, there's that immediate audience of people who came to watch him, to hear him speak. So likely those are people that are already supportive of the civil rights movement and its goals. But looking through his speech, there's also a special focus on fellow Black Americans, especially when he has calls to action, right? He calls on his fellow, he calls them brothers, right? He calls them his brothers quite often with calls to action. But more broadly, this speech is intended not just for the people in front of him, not just people of the same race, but also all Americans, right, who have an interest in a unified nation. The last part of SOAP is purpose. And that's, why was this text created? What is it trying to get the audience to think or do as a result of reading it? And this can look like so many different things. But especially helpful clues in the text would be like the central claim, any claims of policy. Because remember, those are places where the writer is saying, like, we should do this or this should be the way it is. Calls to action, those are big things. But it's really like, what was the author trying to do? Were they trying to inform of a certain thing? Were they trying to entertain in a certain way? Were they trying to convince the audience that, then insert something complicated here? But what was the point? So with I Have a Dream, there's a lot of purposes that are simultaneously true, right? These are all things that MLK was trying to do. Trying to provide comfort and hope and strength to Black Americans. He's trying to criticize and call out those who were saying, like, hey, you should be satisfied, right? We've like done these things. Isn't that enough? And he has several spots where he's responding to those people like, no, we're not satisfied. He's trying to convince Americans of all races to join in this fight. And he's trying to also further strengthen the resolve of those who are already involved, right? So lots of different things going on. So these are the two skills that I'm asking you to focus on in this class. You want to think about rhetorical situation both as a reader, as you read a text, what are the components of the rhetorical situation? Who is the speaker? What is the occasion, which might involve sometimes researching, sometimes you're just looking in the text. What is the audience? And of course, what's the purpose? Because when you get to the writing side of things, it's impossible to be successful as a writer if you're not aware of like if you're not aware on some level of what your purpose is, who your audience is, you're obviously being affected by your occasion, and you want to think about how you're presenting yourself as a speaker. So our skill focuses on audience, like that you can adjust an argument to a certain audience and show an understanding of their beliefs, values, and needs. But the idea is that you're adjusting to the rhetorical situation in full, right? How are you going to achieve this purpose for that audience? Here is our little summary slide. 2 things to take away. I mean, you should take away more. You want to know what speaker, occasion, and audience purpose are, but also here's a little summary. Too long, didn't read, which hopefully isn't true. First thing, a strong writer adapts their writing to the details of a specific situation in order to be successful in achieving their purpose. And 2, a strong reader finds clues in the text to detect what the situation is in order to both achieve a deeper understanding of how a text works, why was it written the way that it was, but also to know when and how you're being manipulated. I don't mean that as a bad thing, right? It's not always bad to be manipulated. There's manipulation happening all the time. It's just, how is someone trying to persuade you? Like, what are they doing in order to try to be persuasive and get you to think a certain way? All right, so we are going to look at a few different texts, and this is where those little pop-up things are going to happen more. If you're in the classroom, this would be like talking and working with your table group, but we're not, or you are, I'm not. So instead, it'll be a little pop-up asking you to identify speaker, occasion, audience, and purpose. First one is a Coca-Cola commercial from 2020. They called it The Great Meal. I didn't realize commercials had titles, but this one does. As you watch, think speaker, occasion, audience, purpose. And afterwards, it'll have a little box for you to type your thoughts about.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go. Lost together, we discovered ourselves again. And we realized that the things that matter deserve time. From now on, we're not going to leave anything on our plates. Because we've learned to savor the moments that were always there. And they never tasted this good.
Okay, so something's going to pop up, and the speaker here, remember, is Coca-Cola. The product, the business, Coca-Cola. Okay, for this one, you should pause in a moment, not quite yet, pause so that you can look at this flyer and kind of gather your thoughts. Maybe jot it down on the scratch piece of paper so that when the thing pops up for you to type, you can still, like, you have your thoughts, because otherwise the box is going to pop up and cover the flyer, and this flyer is the text. So here, the speaker is Cabrillo College. This is a flyer from back in October. Think about, okay, how's Cabrillo trying to present themselves as the speaker? What sorts of context can you identify? That'd be occasion. Who's the audience? What's the purpose? All right, pause here. And then hopefully now you have something written down. Here's your box. Okay, this next text, I was excited to talk with you guys about this, but so it goes. Hopefully we all know Nextdoor, or I don't know if that's a hopeful thing. Nextdoor is an app where people in a neighborhood join and they can all comment on things, and it's like social media but neighborhood based. So a lot of people will post like, oh, I have free spaghetti at this house, come on by, or oh, does anyone know who that guy is walking down the street? Like what? Like people post all kinds of stuff. So here's a post that I found for you. Pretend her name is Jan. I obviously covered up her information. How is she presenting herself as a speaker? What sorts of context can you detect from this? Who does the audience seem to be? And what's the purpose? Again, pause right here so you can read it, jot down some thoughts. And then now, hopefully, when it pops up the box in a moment, you can type your thoughts. Okay, this is the last one. And again, I was excited to talk to you about this in person, but whatever. Here is your last slide. It's your last text for identifying soap. And it's my slide, right? So I made this slide. I'm the speaker. You know the occasion. You hopefully know the audience. What's the purpose? Jot down some thoughts. Pause now to do that. And then here's your box. What's the rhetorical situation of me composing this text? Okay, so that was you practicing kind of individually identifying the rhetorical situation for a variety of texts. What I would like you to do is, when your group members are done with the Edpuzzle, which I realize might take a few minutes, people may be on slightly different pieces. So if you wanted to break up into pairs, that's okay too. But I want everyone to work with someone else on the Blackfish rhetorical situation practice. This is linked on my sub post, right, in Google Classroom, where I said, like, hi, I'm so sick, here's what you do. Make a copy, put your names on it, share it with me, and you should use your notes and your memory. Sorry, this is supposed to happen like right after we finish watching Blackfish, so that it was fresher in your brain. But if you need to like look up information about the movie, that's fine. But what I want you to do is identify the rhetorical situation for the documentary. So the speaker would be like the director, the person that is making this argument and presenting it. Occasion's going to have a ton, and it's okay to do a little research. Audience, obviously, is going to be a big one, and purpose. So go ahead and work on that. And when you're done, which remember, you share that with me. Sorry, you turn that in by sharing it with me. But when you are done with the Blackfish practice, then you're moving on to your independent practice with either Buckley's essay, the Why Don't We Complain, or Tokumitsu's essay from a few days back, In the Name of Love. And that'll be our class period. Okay, I hope this all worked. This took a very long time, but it's worth it if it worked. And I very much hope that I'm back tomorrow.